Did you know that Arnold Schwarzenegger's 1987 dystopian thriller The Running Man was based on a Stephen King novel that the legendary author wrote under a secret pseudonym? King himself hated the movie adaptation so much that he's been vocal about his distaste for it ever since. But now, 37 years later, Edgar Wright is taking another shot at adapting King's brutal vision, and this time he's promising to stay faithful to the source material. Glen Powell is stepping into Arnold's massive boots as Ben Richards in what could be either a masterpiece of dystopian cinema or a cautionary tale about trying to remake an 80s action classic. With a November 2025 release date looming, the question isn't whether this new version will be different, it's whether it can possibly live up to the cultural impact of Schwarzenegger's original. So, what made the 1987 version such an enduring cult classic despite Stephen King's disapproval? Why has it nearly taken 4 decades for Hollywood to attempt another adaptation? And can Edgar Wright's vision possibly capture what made audiences fall in love with Arnold's one-liner spouting, chainsaw-wielding hero? Today, we're diving deep into the original Running Man phenomenon and examining whether this new adaptation has what it takes to honor both King's dark vision and the beloved 80s classic. Reason number 1. The Arnold Factor. The biggest challenge facing Edgar Wright's remake isn't the source material or the budget, it's the sheer impossibility of replacing Arnold Schwarzenegger. The 1987 Running Man worked because it was at its peak, with Arnold delivering one-liners with Austrian precision while wielding chainsaws and rocket launchers. Lines like, "Here's Sub-Zero, now Plane Zero," became iconic not because they were brilliant writing, but because Arnold delivered them with such conviction that audiences just bought into the absurdity. Glen Powell is undeniably talented, but he's stepping into boots that were custom-made for a 7-time Mr. Olympia champion. Arnold's physical presence was so overwhelming that audiences never questioned how a single man could take down an entire dystopian game show. His accent made every line memorable, his physique made every action sequence believable, and his charisma made even the most ridiculous moments feel earnest. Powell's approach appears to be more grounded and realistic, which could work brilliantly for King's original vision of a desperate everyman, but it also means losing the larger-than-life quality that made the original so quotable and rewatchable. The new film might be a better adaptation, but it faces the nearly impossible task of being as entertaining as Arnold at his peak. Reason number 2. Trading iconic villains for realistic darkness. The 1987 film gave us some of the most memorable villains in action cinema history. Sub-Zero, Buzzsaw, Dynamo, and Fireball weren't just killers, they were entertainers with distinct personalities and gimmicks that made each encounter feel like a boss battle in a video game. Richard Dawson's Damon Killian was the perfect blend of game show host charm and sadistic manipulation, creating a villain who was both familiar and terrifying. Wright's version promises to be more faithful to King's novel, which means replacing these colorful antagonists with more realistic but potentially less memorable hunters. The trailer shows Lee Pace as Evan McCone, a masked figure who looks genuinely menacing but lacks the theatrical flair of the original Stalkers. While this approach may serve the story's themes better, it risks losing the pure entertainment value that made the original's villains so beloved. The challenge is that audiences have been conditioned by nearly 4 decades of escalating action cinema. What felt extreme and over-the-top in 1987 might seem quaint by today's standards. Wright needs to find a way to make this more grounded approach feel just as thrilling as arena combat with chainsaw-wielding maniacs. Reason number 3. The tone tightrope. Stephen King's original Running Man is relentlessly dark. It's a story about a man who watches his family die and responds by committing what amounts to a terrorist attack. The novel's ending, Richard crashing a hijacked plane into a skyscraper, was shocking in 1982, but carries unavoidable associations with real-world tragedies in 2025. Wright faces an almost impossible balancing act. Stay too faithful to King's vision and you risk creating a film so bleak that audiences reject it. Lighten the tone too much and you're just making another version of the 1987 film that King already hated. The director's track record suggests he can find humor in dark situations, but the Running Man's source material might be too unforgiving for his usual approach. Wright needs to find fresh angles on themes that have been explored extensively in the decades since King wrote his novel. Reason number 4. Creating King's true vision. Here's where the remake has its strongest advantage. Wright can finally realize King's vision of a global manhunt in ways that were technically impossible in 1987. The original film's confined arena setting was partly a practical limitation, showing a worldwide chase would have been prohibitively expensive and technically challenging with 80s filmmaking technology. Wright's version can use modern visual effects, location shooting, and digital filmmaking to create the scope King originally intended. The The trailer already shows chase sequences spanning multiple environments and vehicles, suggesting a film that truly captures the paranoia of being hunted by an entire population. Modern surveillance technology, social media tracking, and facial recognition can make Richard's situation feel genuinely hopeless in ways that serve the story's themes. The supporting cast can also suggest Wright is taking full advantage of contemporary talent. Josh Brolin and Coleman Domingo bring dramatic weight to roles that could easily become cartoonish, while Michael Cera's casting suggests Wright is willing to make unexpected choices that serve the story rather than following familiar patterns. Reason number 5. Why now is the perfect time? The timing for this remake couldn't be better. King's themes of economic desperation, media manipulation, corporate control feel more relevant in 2025 than they did in 1987. The original film's satirical elements, a population obsessed with televised violence, the blurring of entertainment and news, reality TV as social control, now feel more like documentary than science fiction. Audiences in 2025 have lived through social media algorithms that reward extreme content, reality shows that exploit human suffering for entertainment, and economic inequality that forces people into increasingly desperate situations. Wright's version doesn't need to convince viewers that such a society could exist. We're already living in a version of it. The film also arrives at a moment when audiences are hungry for stories that address systemic problems rather than individual heroics. The original's focus on Arnold's personal journey of vindication feels outdated compared to King's broader critique of societal structures that create such desperation in the first place. Reason number 6. The Edgar Wright Factor. Wright brings a unique combination of skills that could make this adaptation special. His track record with genre filmmaking, from zombie comedies to heist thrillers to psychological horror, demonstrates an ability to find fresh approaches to familiar material. More importantly, he's proven he can balance entertainment value with serious themes without sacrificing either. His collaboration with screenwriter Michael Bacall suggests the film will find ways to inject humor and creativity without undermining King's darker vision. Wright's distinctive visual style, kinetic editing, precise choreography, and creative use of music could make the running and hiding sequences genuinely thrilling rather than repetitive. Reason number 7. The nostalgia trip. The remake's biggest enemy might be time itself. The 1987 Running Man has had nearly 4 decades to build its reputation through home video, cable TV, and nostalgic appreciation. Flaws that were evident in the initial release have been forgotten, while memorable moments have been elevated to classic status through repetition and cultural osmosis. This creates an almost impossible standard for the remake to meet. No matter how good Wright's version might be, it will be compared to an idealized version of the original that exists more in collective memory than in actual reality. The 1987 film earned mixed reviews and modest box office success, but it's now remembered as a beloved 80s classic. Wright's film also faces the challenge of competing with an entire generation's childhood memories. For many viewers, Arnold's Running Man represents their introduction to dystopian fiction, action cinema, or Stephen King's work. Replacing those formative experiences with something different, even if it's objectively better, might feel like a betrayal of personal history. However, this challenge also represents an opportunity. If Wright can create something that works for both longtime fans and newcomers, he'll have achieved something remarkable. The key will be respecting what made the original special while finding new ways to explore King's themes for contemporary audiences. What could go wrong? Despite all the promising elements, several factors could derail Wright's adaptation. The most significant risk is tone. King's novel is relentlessly bleak, and while that darkness serves the story's themes, it could prove exhausting for mainstream audiences. Finding the right balance between honoring King's vision and creating an entertaining film will require precision. The ending presents a particular challenge. King's original conclusion, Richard's crashing a plane into a skyscraper, carries unfortunate associations with real-world terrorism that weren't present in 1982. Wright will need to find a way to maintain the apocalyptic fury of King's ending while avoiding imagery that could be misinterpreted or offensive. There's also the risk of overthinking the material. The 1987 film worked partly because of its straightforward approach. Good guy fights bad system, wins through determination and superior firepower. Wright's more complex approach could result in a film that's intellectually satisfying but emotionally distant. The casting of Glen Powell, while promising, carries its own risks. Powell has charisma and acting ability, but he doesn't have the instant screen presence that made Arnold's version work. The new film will need to earn audience investment in ways the original didn't, and that's a significant challenge. But hey, that's just our opinion. What do you think? Can Glen Powell fill Arnold's iconic boots, or is this remake doomed to disappoint fans of both the novel and the original film? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more deep dives into Hollywood's biggest remakes and reboots. This video is made by movie fans, for movie fans.